Smoke threads through the palace at Jericho where the lamps burn low, and the air itself seems to hesitate. The courtiers keep their distance, listening for the sound that has ruled their lives for decades. The king's voice. It comes now, cracked and stubborn, from behind curtains that smell of oils and incense, failing to outpace something older and stronger. "When I die," Herod says, "kill the elders of Israel so the nation weeps." Servants freeze. Scribes scratch the words as if they are knives. And then, beyond the walls, the date palms sway over channels he ordered dug, over roads he drove through the desert like signatures in stone. Herod the Great, builder of ports and palaces, governor for Rome, stranger to his own people, has made his last policy, grief on command. Before the physicians argue, before the rumors multiply, the body begins its terrible testimony. What the court won't say to his face, his flesh now speaks without permission. The heat in his skin never quite falls. Nights become slick with fever that pulls at him like undertow. He scratches and cannot stop. Oil helps, briefly. Wine helps, briefly. Then the itching returns like a tide, and the king's nails leave lines that bead with blood. The historian Josephus will one day write with a steady hand that Herod died in stages. Lucidity chained to decay. A mind alert while the vessel rotted. It will read like a physician's case note and a moral fable at once. But every fable has a beginning, and his does not begin with disease. It begins with an outsider's hunger. Herod is not born to the throne he holds like a fist. His father, Antipater the Idumean, finds avenues under Roman shadow. Herod learns early that survival is a craft. When civil war shreds Judea, he backs Antigonus's execution and presents himself to Rome not as a supplicant, but as a solution. He studies the weather of power and sails it. Mark Antony when Antony looks eternal. Octavian when Octavian becomes Augustus. He is the kind of man who can read the room and remake the room, who understands that marble is an argument and height is a sermon. He raises the harbor at Caesarea on Roman cement that hardens underwater, as if the sea itself has been tamed. He amplifies the Temple Mount until its platform seems to float, a stone horizon where prayers gather like swallows. He crowns a hill with Herodium, a palace he shapes into a volcano of his own name. He threads aqueducts across thirsty land and sets Masada like a chess piece on a cliff. A last word he hopes no enemy can answer. All this, and still the Jerusalem elite look at him and see a Roman glove over a local hand. They see an Idumean married into legitimacy. They see a throne occupied rather than inherited. Suspicion moves into Herod like a winter draft and never leaves, a permanent tenant of the mind. Love, when it comes, arrives as Mariamne the Hasmonean, beauty and dynastic bridge, and it meets the same current. Whispers crackle. Rumors gleam. One day duty and fear arrive at a door together, and the king permits the door to open. He signs an execution warrant he cannot bear to read twice. The grief afterward is genuine and bottomless. He calls for her at strange hours, he speaks to rooms where she isn't. But the line is crossed, and once you slaughter memory, the living are easy. Alexandra follows, then the sons Alexander and Aristobulus, strangled under charges that sound like echoes in a long hallway. Augustus, with the easy cruelty of the powerful, jokes that in Herod's house it is safer to be a pig than a son. Courtiers snort laughter and try not to make eye contact with the man who can unmake them at breakfast. By his 60s, when the first dull pains arrive, Herod is practiced at the economy of fear. He pays stipends in terror, salary in spectacle. The physicians, Greek-trained, solemn, certain, begin with the humors. Let the black bile be balanced, the yellow appeased. They ration food, warm him with wool, cool him with baths, open a vein. The fever, however, keeps its appointment. It lives in him like an occupying force. It is joined by a new ambassador of misery. Pain low in the belly that throws a net into the groin and pulls tight. He becomes light-sensitive and sound-resentful. Voices scrape. He eats and the stomach rebels, and the king who commissioned mountains to be carved now counts victories in sips and swallows. Outside his doors, the administration massages the maps and invoices of empire. Grain purchases he once paid for by melting royal gold during famine. Taxes reduced here, jobs ceded there, and the people still do not love him. He is not one of them. The rejection becomes a lens. Through it all faces turn treacherous. It is then the symptoms choose to escalate from nuisance to parable. The swelling comes in the ankles first. A press of thumb leaves a dent that lingers, a small proof of failure hidden beneath the hems of a king. The flesh tightens along the calves, then the belly rises like a drum, and sleep becomes negotiation. He sends for an amulet because men who believe only in stone begin to bargain with string when the stone won't listen. The scent in the bedchamber changes. Incense thickens. Servants switch to stronger resins. Physicians whisper words they will later pretend they never said. The groin darkens. A single patch of purple becomes a bruise without cause. Then a map expanding, and the pain jerks like a fish on a line. The king cannot sit. The king cannot stand. The king can only hover between positions as if posture has become a country where none of his treaties apply. Flesh in that hidden place begins to die faster than dignity can keep up. Under the skin, bacteria cut roads, cut bridges, starve towns of blood until the towns are quiet. The stench that arrives is not metaphorical. It is chemistry. It moves through corridors and chooses noses at random. It kneels physicians. The chamberlains roll cloths and tie them over their mouths and still gag. The king watches them gag and learns a new species of rage. Not the rage of policy or rebellion. Rage at oxygen. Rage at the betrayal of his own cells. He remains lucid, which is its own cruelty. He can think clearly enough to sign orders and remember why he should doubt the man holding the ink. Antipater, the son positioned and repositioned as heir, breathes in a way that feels like conspiracy. Money moves in the dark. A cup seems to linger in the wrong hand. The king is certain, then less certain, then certain again. Certainty is a narcotic to men who have run on it all their lives. The physicians borrow farther into ritual and herb. They raise the dose of opium until the king hovers at a cliff's edge between relief and oblivion. And still the pain writes its letters on his nerves. Maggots arrive exactly as nature instructs them to. Eggs in the rim where necrosis meets air, larvae hatching and feeding with perfect indifference to crown or calendar. In another century and a sterile tent, a surgeon will introduce medicated larvae into a wound and be praised for genius. Here the process is the same but stripped of control. A lesson in democracy offered by rot. Attendants try to harvest the writhing with spatulas and tweezers. They pull living flesh with dead. Herod howls and can no longer shape the howls into language. The palace discovers new protocols for disgust. Priests can't come near him because ritual impurity attends the dying and the dead. He is both at once. Guards rotate hourly. Men of iron on campaign now leaning pale on cool stone outside the curtains. Between waves of agony, the old reflex returns. Strategy. He has never allowed a room to be arranged without considering every chair's allegiance. Dying will not change that. The will is redrafted and redrafted. A blade honed against heirs who flinch when light touches them. Archelaus glows brighter, then dims. Antipas steps forward, then backward. Philip waits with the patience of a man who understands diminishment. Sister Salome, unwavering administrator of palace weather, becomes the instrument of a final cruelty. Gather the elders when I fail. Make their deaths the trumpet of mine. It is a plan born of logic. Grief can be engineered and panic. What if there is laughter? What if Jerusalem throws open windows? The doctors, at last candid in private, propose movement as medicine. Caloroo, they say, and the name tastes like rescue. Spring water sparked by the planet's furnace. Sulfur steam that witnesses have sworn makes the blind see metaphors. A litter is built. The king travels not as conqueror now, but as cargo through desert that glows at a distance like metal. The air at the springs tastes of eggs and earth. Pilgrims part to make way for the spectacle of power's unmasking. He is lowered carefully, or as carefully as the geometry of pain allows. Water, too hot, too honest, finds the open places in him instantly. He rises in a single torn sound and nearly leaves the world. The attendants weep with the effort of pulling him free. He wakes thin and animal and forbids a second immersion. A myth dies in his eyes. He understands for the first time perhaps that scale cannot buy him out of this contract. In the long hallway back to Jericho, the plan clarifies. If he cannot command his flesh, he can command their feeling. The order about the elders remains on his tongue like iron. He tests the perimeter of death with a knife request, feigning the need to cut fruit. An old soldier reads the old general and removes the blade smoothly. Herod's anger is as large as ever, but it cannot stand up. Word, inaccurate and eager, moves through the palace, and the king is dead, and reaches cells set aside for inconvenient sons. Antipater hears and tastes air like a starving man. He boasts, he bribes. He stands inside a crown he does not yet own, and the message rockets back to its originator. Your heir celebrates you as corpse. Rage clarifies Herod as surely as morphine. He spends the last of his mint on a command he has given before: take the sun. Roman protocol wants a rubber stamp. The king's will is stamp enough. The execution is completed, quick and competent. 5 days later, the competence returns for its paymaster. The anatomy of dying is banal and cosmic. Extremities cool. Breath shortens and widens, a man crossing a river stone by stone with too much water between. Fluids escape habit. The face withdraws into angles last seen in youth and then beyond. Herod's chamber smells as if the ground has opened under the bed. Smoke tries and fails to argue with chemistry. The palace stands at attention. One faction poised, then another, like birds on a wire that all choose the same gust at once. When his heart steps away, the silence is a physical thing. Not reverence, relief. Men who have learned to edit their exhalations let them out. Women who have learned to freight silence with gratitude let the mask fall. The body loses gas. The skin slackens into a mask not quite human. All the titles he wore fall to the floor without sound. The funeral is as he designed it. Gold in the sunlight. Soldiers in scales. A bier overseen by the absolute grammar of purple. Professional mourners give public sadness its vowels. The populace supplies the consonants of endurance. It is performance, but performance is governance in the ancient world. And Herod manages even this last act from beyond. The procession climbs toward Herodium, the hill that is more noun than mountain because he willed it into shape, a cone where no cone belonged, and a tomb awaiting the man who imagined it. Spices wage their old campaign against time in the enclosed chamber. Linen is a technology. Stone is the only safe. The door seals. The desert approves with silence. A generation later, rebellion will visit the tomb with a sledgehammer and a memory. The sarcophagus will become grit, and an archaeologist 2 millennia after that will brush its powder back into narrative, a quiet defeat of oblivion that the king might respect if he could. His sons divide and diminish, as sons of large men often do. Archelaus rules brutally and briefly. Rome removes him the way a careful hand removes a splinter. Antipas manages longevity without stature, and makes his mark not with aqueducts but with a prophet's head. Philip governs like a bookkeeper whose columns always add. When he dies, the math resets to 0. The great machine Herod built, inefficient in love, unmatched in spectacle, throws a belt and then another. Administration turns to supervision. Supervision becomes occupation. Occupation births the history most people know. In the sermons and panels painted centuries later, worms flower from a king's skin as if justice were horticulture. It is morality theater, yes, but it is also accurate at a level that makes modern doctors nod grimly. The edema, the pruritus of uremia, the Fournier's gangrene, the pulmonary drowning, the drifting mind. Josephus, who never met a moral lesson he could not appreciate, is also simply describing what any intern might page an attending to see at 3 in the morning. Somewhere between those two truths, parable and pathology, stands the man. Look at what remain. A skyline drafted by a will that would not yield, platforms so ambitious that even ruin cannot retire them, a hill that still looks too symmetrical to be an accident, stones that remember a hand insisting that permanence is a task, not a gift. And then listen to what remains. A story used again and again when chroniclers wish to caution princes, when preachers wish to attach rot to arrogance, when filmmakers need a body to dramatize a soul. The lesson is not subtle, but it is correct. Power is an appetite that expands to match its plate. Fear is a solvent that strips paint and then wood and then bone. Control is an illusion, until the day your own organs decline to obey. Herod tried to write his name in basalt and lime. Time annotated it in tissue. The great builder's last edifice was unintentional, a monument in flesh to the limits of dominion. He had wanted statues. He received a caution. He had wanted a dynasty. He received a dossier. He had wanted grief on schedule. He received at last the unprogrammed relief of strangers, and still the ports he carved made ships possible, and the platform he raised gave pilgrims a horizon, and the road he cut to Jericho, where he died, is the same road on which the story leaves him. Heat, dust, a hill, a sealed chamber, and a nation discovering that even the most colossal tyrant is, finally, exactly mortal.